Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, I will now call roll. Sandy Rowe.
Here.
Greg Heyman.
Present.
Natalie Arnott. Rachel Biscoe. Richard Devlin.
Present.
Helen Edwards. Arno Fajardo. Evelyn Coker. Teresa Martinez.
Here.
Jen Proctor Andrews.
Here.
Mary Middleton.
Here.
Emily Simnett.
Present.
Jennifer Smith.
Here.
Gail Yamasaki. Thank you, Madam Chair. That is roll. We have a quorum, and I will keep monitoring and update as additional members join online.
Thank you, Guthrie. A couple of things that I want to touch on before we get started. First of all, we had elections in May, and Rachel Biscoe has been elected to the Lynn Minton Community College Board. Congratulations. So moving on from us. So congratulations to you. And also wanted to do a shout out for Mount Hood Community College and Lisa Scari and her team for, that's the first bond measure they have gotten passed there in 50 years. Wow. And it was what, 136 million, which isn't a whole lot. We have that much delayed maintenance, but anyway, that was very good news to get that passed. So two things about elections. Also, as you've seen on the agenda before we adjourn today, we will elect a new chair. So this is the last meeting I will chair. Though I will stay on the HECC and participate until my replacement is named and confirmed by the legislature. So sometime late summer, early fall. So I'm not leaving you yet. Can't get rid of me that easily. I want to take a minute and talk about the work ahead and build on the points that Greg and I made last month in our meeting. First of all, I want to thank you for your participation and enthusiasm in that meeting. It helped so much because that was a difficult meeting to sort of face the heavy work we have to do ahead in looking at the colleges and universities and the whole system and looking at our work and getting them aligned and making sure they fit with the strategic plan. And so after we went through our things, to hear your enthusiasm and your ideas building on sort of how we should proceed was just a huge, huge help. Also, you heard us in that meeting recommend a deep dive on how higher education in Oregon is organized, on the processes, on the dynamics of how our schools operate, how they work with each other, how they work with us. We really need to know what structures and pieces we need in place in order to get the outcomes that the state and the state citizens deserve, and in order to strengthen our schools. What we heard back from you last month is that you understand both the peril of the funding situation as well as the political peril at play today, and that you understand and believe that HECC really must lead the way, understanding the dynamics and how the schools can operate independently yet within a system, and in what ways our governance structure is effective, and in what ways for today's challenges and what we face in the future, what ways it probably is not effective. Several of you emphasized the need for far more than minor changes around the edges, and I really appreciate that. Greg and Ben and I agree on that there's too much big work to be done. We can't just say, okay, well, let's change this one little thing, and that's why we want to do a comprehensive look. I told you that we begin to identify the questions and the path and how to proceed with our university and college partners. Since then, we've had a few developments. Since then, the legislature has expressed its own concerns by way of a budget note that they have sent us. It's the first time I've received a budget note. But anyway, the note that they attached to the 25-27 biennium budget. By the next legislative session, so a little bit less than a year from now, HECC is directed to gather and analyze a host of data regarding university staff ratios, spending, enrollment, growth of programs, elimination of programs, and a whole lot more with the direction, quote, to assess spending and cost efficiencies. We are to report our findings and any other issue relating to preserving the integrity of the post-secondary experience for students while ensuring long-term financial sustainability for the institutions. Kyle might have more on this in his report on the budget note. That charge from the legislature, it's clear they want accountability, and it's our job to help give it. There's also potentially an opportunity there because we know how underfunded we are in some ways, and we believe the colleges and universities are efficient in their operations, but the data will show us more. And so we need to do that. But it's going to be a big lift. It at least comes at this time, and so we will tie our work to that or that to our work. It's data we likely need anyway. I don't have to tell you, though, that ensuring the long-term financial sustainability is not where we are today. And without significant changes and likely additional funding, it is unlikely we will get there. So that's they picked the right words. You know, we need to guarantee the long-term financial sustainability of these schools. And so that is the work of the next year. Among the commissioners, I know we all agree that the state doesn't provide the level of funding we need. And we know that neighboring states, whether they're blue states or red states, provide for their students at a higher level on a per student basis. So at HECC, obviously, we do want and need more resources for the schools and for students. And we consider advocacy a very important role for us. We're not going to back away from advocacy, but at the same time, as I told you last month, we're going to proceed with the work in front of us. We're going to proceed with the situation as it is and make sure that we can make improvements doing that. And we absolutely have to imagine a different future for the schools and for the students, because none of the directional indicators that we see look good. They just don't. Everybody's kind of holding their own and doing okay, but when you look directionally from any perspective, we can't have the sustainability we want on the current track. We have to change the track. You'll also see echoes of this concern will turn up in today's meeting in the public university evaluations for University of Oregon, OSU, and PSU, and in the report that Greg will give on the funding and on the substance of the F&A meeting yesterday. So all of these things are sort of ringing the same bells in different ways. I have to say, though, that even amid all of this uncertainty and challenge, I am still very optimistic that we can improve our position in partnerships with the university and college presidents and the very strong leaders we have at our institutions, and that we can end up serving the public well and come out stronger and better prepared for the future. So I just wanted to leave you with that note. I am encouraged, and I thank you for all you are doing. So, let's see. Minutes, thank you. I have an agenda. Yes, the chair has an agenda. Okay. Has everyone read the May minutes? You can have a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you. A second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we will go to the executive director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, really appreciate your opening remarks. Much to think about and discuss related to that. I know that'll be a topic not only throughout today's meeting, but others to follow. I'll be brief, touch on just a few items. You'll hear much more later this morning from Kyle about the legislative session and our update there, including the progress of our budget, which has now received votes in the Ways and Means Committee and is proceeding along its way towards the governor. But I'll just, sort of stepping back from the specifics, I'll just reflect a bit on this session as it draws towards a conclusion. We have a pretty decent sense of how things will land. And it has been an unremarkable session for higher education, honestly. There's as you will hear, the budget is what the legislature will describe as largely a current service level budget, but we know for our work, the current service level in the current context actually means some pretty significantly negative impacts on institutions and students that this commission has identified going back over a year for the governor and for the legislature. So current service level is challenging. It also is a session that will ultimately involve passing very little in the way of new policy or statutory changes for higher education, for better or worse. There's just, while there were a number of bills introduced, very little of any magnitude will actually pass. And that's to some extent a reflection of the tight budget circumstances that the legislature finds itself in. So new initiatives, for example, that would have cost money are, for the most part, not moving forward. And I think while the budget environment is the largest contributor to that sort of state of the stasis, it's also, again, I think it seems pretty clearly the case there's not tremendous legislative energy around higher education and workforce issues. We continue to be in a situation where the legislature lacks sort of a robust set of experienced champions for these issues. There's been a lot of turnover. On the bright side, there are new or newish legislators who have spent this session, some of them, immersed through their committee assignments in higher education and workforce issues. And while they will not, again, be responsible for passing much in the way of substantive legislation, they are learning a lot and are becoming more engaged. And so I think it is possible to imagine a trajectory here, assuming they stick around and stay in their roles or assume greater levels of leadership for higher education and workforce. I think it's possible to imagine a sort of growing cadre of legislators who are engaged and care about these issues. Also on the bright side, I think the agency, through Kyle's efforts and efforts on the part of other staff, continues to be sought after as a source of information, advice, perspective. I feel like our voice and work within the building has been impactful. We certainly have been sought out for counsel from legislative leaders, committee members, as they're trying to work their way through and understand issues. So I think we continue to have the overall respected and trusting kind of relationship with legislators and legislative staff. So it's both been very challenging, but also I think there are some reasons for hope and optimism as we look ahead. But the overall kind of fiscal dynamics that the state is facing has certainly cast a pall over the budget and some of the efforts that well-intentioned legislators and this agency had in bringing forward new initiatives that will not be funded this session. Or new funding for existing programs. Moving on from that, let me say a few words about our strategic plan that you adopted in the fall. At your next meeting, at your August meeting, you will receive an update from me on behalf of our staff that reflects the recommendations that we're making for implementation on about half of the strategic plan items that you adopted last fall. So our inter-office teams within the agency have been hard at work over the last quarter developing those plans, preparing to make recommendations to our executive team to put into action. work that results from and is aligned with your strategic plan. So look forward to that. It's not on your agenda this month, but it will be in August, and I'm looking forward to bringing that to you then. Finally, just say also in sort of some silver linings on some of the dark clouds, including related to budget and enrollment. We, as you know, collect FAFSA information from Oregonians who are interested in accessing federal or state financial aid for the upcoming year. And our FAFSA numbers this spring are strong, reflecting a second year of sizable increase in demand, apparent demand for higher education and interest in accessing higher education and financial aid. So we are now tracking over and above the rates of FAFSA filing that we had 2 years ago. You'll recall last year was really challenging at this point in time because the federal agency, the U.S. Department of Education, is still working out a lot of bugs that were inhibiting people's ability around the country to access and complete the FAFSA. That was true even as late as June of last year. By the fall, they had largely worked through that. But at this point last year, we were well off the pace of the prior year. This year, however, we're exceeding our rates of FAFSA filing from 2 years ago. So that suggests, it's not determinative of fall enrollment, but it does suggest that there is a increased demand for access to college and university and for financial aid. That is, of course, a positive. It also reflects the efforts that our colleges, universities, and our own staff have made to connect not only high school students, but returning students and prospective adult students with financial aid. So positive story there. We'll keep track of that. It does, final thing I'll say, I see the hand. It does, this increase in demand, particularly for financial aid, does put additional strain on our financial aid budgets, right? So part of what we are having to assess sort of week to week currently, given the legislative budget that we just got last week, is the degree to which we will be able to extend our state financial aid commitments to the Oregon Promise, the Oregon Opportunity Grant, the Oregon Tribal Student Grant, the Oregon National Guard Student Tuition Assistance Program, the extent to which we'll be able to extend those commitments to new students or exercise cost controls based on income or the other criteria that the law allows us to use in order to manage our budgets. With increased demand and flat budgets comes some restrictions, and that's what we're in the process of assessing through our Office of Student Access and Completion, and we'll be conveying to current applicants, some of whom will receive disappointing news that they are not going to receive an Oregon Promise grant for the fall if they're a new student who doesn't meet our income threshold, or if they're an Oregon Tribal Student Grant recipient who, or applicant who is enrolling in or plans to enroll in a graduate program, for example. We will probably, we have a final determination, but we will probably not have the budget to support new graduate students in that program. So those are a couple of the types of cost control measures that we will be putting in place given increasing demand and flat budgets. So that those were a few of the items I wanted to share. In my report, there is in your packet the data on our spending against our current budget, our monthly budget update. Thanks to great work on the part of our operations director, Tom Reel, and our budget staff and team, we are going to stay within our legislatively approved budget that from the 23-25 biennium. We have 2 more weeks under that budget, and we'll finish just under the wire there. So that's what I have to report.
Sorry, those numbers for the financial aid, is it just anyone going into any college who lives in Oregon, or is it just Oregon colleges, or is it out of state linked to an Oregon college?
Yeah, so we receive directly and automatically from the U.S. Department of Education, we receive the FAFSAs of any Oregonian who files one. And so that includes students who ultimately plan to attend the school out of state, but it also includes, of course, 100,000 Oregonians who have listed an in-state school and will attend here. We don't know from that FAFSA data, we don't know until the fall where they will actually enroll or at what level of enrollment, or, but it is this early indicator of demand and of need. And I think we're at somewhere like 140,000 currently for the fall.
Any other questions for Ben?
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
this is just a procedural question. I don't know if it came out late, but I, as of yet, have not received either the written version of the director's report or the legislative report.
Yeah, I can address that, Commissioner. So there is not a written version of my report. I'm happy to follow up with notes in writing if that would be helpful, Commissioner Devlin. The Kyle's legislative report is available online via the material submission. We didn't email it separately this meeting, but it is available via our website. I think it's item
8.0, and I'll post it in the chat.
Thank you. Did you hear Guthrie posting it in the chat? And it's on
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
Commissioner Edwards.
Ben, just because I don't know how this data the reports come in. The FAFSA increases, how do we know that that's like a really material increase based on demand for education versus demand for finance? How does that come through?
Commissioner Edwards, it's a good question. I mean, we have, a decade plus of historical FAFSA submission data that gives us, it helps us predict. We focus most on the impact on our grant programs naturally, right? So we analyze that data and compare it with prior year data to predict the likelihood that the sort of likely utilization rates for our grant programs. We also, though, observe a relationship between FAFSA submission and enrollment. I think that's a less, we're less scientific about that, but nevertheless see a relationship over the years between FAFSA submissions and enrollment. The fact is most students, regardless of their income or assets, do file FAFSAs. There are, of course, some who don't, either because they're not eligible to or because they are quite confident that they would not be eligible for any aid and don't intend to access federal lending, so they don't bother, right? But the vast majority do. And so while financial need, the student's financial need certainly shows up on the FAFSA via the information they supply, and that varies over the years. Like we saw during the Great Recession, we not only saw a big increase in FAFSA submissions, we saw a big increase in high need FAFSA submissions, right? As people lost jobs and had much more difficult financial circumstances. But we also can use the overall FAFSA filing rates as an indicator of overall demand for education, given the fact that even students who don't have high levels of financial need still typically file a FAFSA. That is true of the vast majority of our students. So I hope that's I recognize the question and the nuances there, and I think we appreciate that and yet believe that the overall submission rate does help give us a insight into enrollment demand.
Cool. So that what I take from that is that this is long running analysis that your team does.
Correct.
Cool. Do you have any causal sense of what's going on here?
No, I don't think we do in any rigorous way. We are continuing though, some observations. One is that we believe we are on a post-pandemic upswing, that we are still coming off of the sharp declines in FAFSA submission and enrollment during the pandemic. So we think that's part of what's occurring. I believe, and this is a little bit more speculative, I believe though that there has been we have swung, the pendulum swung during the late 2010s and early 2020s, particularly as wages for entry-level positions in the job market increased sharply, partly due to minimum wage increases by the state and then other factors within the economy, greater demand for workers. That the pendulum swung against enrollment, particularly in the community colleges during that time period, late 2010s, early 2020s. Folks realized they could get $20 an hour jobs in most parts of the state without college level completion or enrollment. That is still the case in many places. The economy, the job market is still, okay to good in many parts of the state. However, I do think that some of the folks, particularly younger people, who delayed or chose not to enroll in college or university and instead take that entry-level position, are starting to recognize that there's a ceiling on their careers, and now they're maybe in their mid-20s, maybe in their late 20s, and recognizing they don't want to hit that ceiling. They don't want to stay at that ceiling for the remainder of their careers. And so there's been, particularly at the community colleges, and we've heard this from them, there's been a return to community college level, and this probably affects some of the universities too, enrollment from that young adult cohort that didn't go into college directly out of high school, but chose the workforce and now is recognizing, wow, yeah, I can meet my basic needs perhaps through that entry-level work, but I can't get ahead, right? I can't get towards owning a home. I can't, realistically support a family. Those are things I want to do. College is a step towards that.
Thanks.
Anything else? Okay, Sarah Foster, are you with us for the governor's report?
I am. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the conversation you were just having, I think only reinforces some of the original remarks you were making, Chair Rowe, just about how students are engaging differently in our higher education system. So just wanted to say I just really appreciate the dialogue. As always, Chair Rowe and Director Cannon, I feel like you provide most of my updates for me before I join, but I'm going to just reiterate a few points and around the budget. So I'll just share that HECC isn't unique insofar as many agencies have been funded at CSL, and the legislature has been pretty cautious about standing up new programs or program expansions in their budget bills. And I'll just name that this includes other fund agencies as well, so not just general fund. It's just been consistent across the budget landscape. For the HECC budget, I know you've seen many versions of this, but wanted to just share that, we recognize that there was an omission of the GRB increases, and in particular, the Oregon Opportunity Grant, Tribal Student Success Grant, and the National Guard Tuition Assistance Program. The governor really feels that those are critical programs for students to access higher ed. So just wanted to acknowledge that we recognize those omissions. Also, that didn't include the 25.7 investment in behavioral health and the $5 million in pre-apprenticeship scholarships for housing construction, which are two of the governor's priorities. Again, this is not surprising given the budget environment and the co-chair's budget framework, but over the next couple of weeks, I had several, but then I'm like, this is not several, this is the next couple of weeks. We are, as the legislature makes final decisions on programs and funding allocations, about any programs that will be reinstated or budgets that will be reinstated in the end of session bill. So we're just tracking this closely. I don't have any more information to share about that, but just know that we recognize that some of those GRB increases were not in the HECC budget. I just want to say that I appreciate all the work you are doing and continue to do around higher education policy and just the recent direction from the legislature for assessing spending and cost efficiencies. So just feel like you know, Chair Rowe and Vice Chair Heyman, you have started to lay the groundwork in your last report to the commission. So just commend you to continue that work. And just let our office know what you need to continue to do that work and to fulfill the direction from the legislature. I also want to thank HECC leadership. We recently launched Behavioral Health Talent Council, which it was established by the governor and will create an action plan for the talent assessment that was commissioned at the HECC. So just wanted to thank you for your work on that and for some of the institutions and HECC staff that are participating in both the working group and the council itself. So just wanted to share a little appreciation and know that the council is going to be standing up recommendations on how to move the work of the recommendations out of that assessment forward in a couple of different ways. But preliminarily, we just stood up the council. I don't have a lot more to share, but just appreciate the work that you continue to lean in on for workforce and talent development. So that's my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions, anyone? I think you addressed the issues we're aware of.
Thank you.
And really appreciate your continued involvement and support for us, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again. Bye.
Okay, now we have the invited guest testimony.
Yeah, and I'll welcome Tom Hermish. I think he's on the line, joining probably from DC. That's his home and workplace. Tom is with, and him invite introduce himself in a minute, but I will, because I've known Tom and Shio a long time, I will say a couple of words. Shio, as most of you know, is the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association, so it's the national association of which we're a member. I've served for a number of years on the executive committee and been deeply involved in that organization along with my counterparts from around the country. Tom is the government affairs director for SHIO and is just one of the few people in this country who is most steeped in state and federal policy for higher education. He works with a number of folks on the Hill, and so asked him to provide for you today an update on the federal environment for higher education, given the sort of rapid changes and proposals coming out of DC this year. So with that, Tom, take it away.
Yeah, how's the climate in DC?
Well, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission for inviting me to be a guest speaker today. I'm actually coming to you from Niagara Falls because I'm speaking later today at the State Budget Officers Association meeting. But a lot to talk about today as far as the federal update goes, and I do want to see if I can share my screen. Let me just see here. No, maybe that's not it. 1 second here.
I'd be happy to present.
Okay, does this work for you all?
You got it.
Okay, so this is the my slideshow just to talk about some of these federal policy issues. I know some of them get to be a bit in the weeds, so I did want to present a PowerPoint, so hopefully I'll be able to advance it. But with that, oops.
Sorry, I'll present.
Okay, all right.
Let me know when you
So,
advance the slide.
all right. Well, again, thank you all for joining and the invitation to SHIO to talk about federal policy. And just to go to the next slide, and just to talk about SHIO and our work. As Ben said, SHIO's been she was the national organization representing Oregon Higher Education Coordinating Commission. We've been around for 70 years. We're active in red states and in blue states, and we're really focused on meeting states where they're at and helping them advance their higher education attainment goals. So our focus is really on policy research, leadership, and advocacy. And a few years ago, the SHIO board decided to get to step out on federal policy. And so we opened our Washington, D.C. office, and we've been active on a range of federal issues over the past 5 years. So if we go into the next slide, the bulk of my presentation today is about the big, beautiful bill, the reconciliation package that is under consideration in Congress right now. I do want to talk about FY26 budget that the Trump administration has proposed, as well as what's going on at the Department of Education, some new executive orders and other news, but also want to take some of your questions. I know there's a lot going on right now, and be happy to answer any questions that you all have on federal higher education policy. So if we go to the next slide. So the reconciliation package. So the reconciliation process is a special process that Congress uses that pertains to taxes and spending and the debt limit. And the advantage of this reconciliation process is that it allows the Senate to bypass its filibuster. So you do not need 60 votes to get something through on reconciliation. You only need 51, as well as a majority in the House of Representatives, and of course to be signed by the president. The reconciliation package does have special rules. It only applies to mandatory spending programs. So that is Medicaid, SNAP, student loans. It can apply to Medicare. Social Security is exempt from this process, but it's a vehicle for Congress to make changes to some of those mandatory spending programs. It does not. You cannot just throw anything in the reconciliation process. It does have to do with either increasing or decreasing the deficit. So if you have a package on immigration or guns or what have you, if it's not materially related to taxes and spending, it can be thrown out of the reconciliation package. So what are they trying to advance in this reconciliation package, and why does it matter for higher education? The first, of course, is the 2017 tax cut. That extending that is the centerpiece of this reconciliation package. So that would be over the next 10 years. The cost would be into the trillions. They estimate around 4 trillion, give or take some, and increased border security, as well as investments in defense. And the House has passed the reconciliation package by one vote a few weeks ago, and now it is in the Senate. So here is how it intersects with higher education. If we go to the next slide. How it works is that they basically give instructions to different committees to either increase or decrease the deficit. So you can see Ways and Means, that is the tax cut right there. Homeland Security with the border, Judiciary Committee and the like. So you can see all of those and where they either increase or decrease the deficit. So on the House side, the Energy and the Education and Workforce Committee is looking at around $250 billion in savings in order to help finance this package. So they're going to be looking to make cuts in the Education and Workforce Committee. So if we go to the next slide. It is not just the Education and Workforce Committee that that will be focused on today. There's also parts of the bill in other committees that will affect higher education. I said earlier that I'm at the NASBO convention, the state budget officers. The discussion today is actually about Medicaid. So Medicaid, there are cuts in Medicaid in the House bill that will affect states. So the federal cuts to states of 700, this is from the Kaiser Family Foundation, $793 billion over 10 years would represent 12% of federal spending on Medicaid over the period. So states would either have to raise taxes or make cuts elsewhere in order to fill in some of the gap left by the Medicaid cuts. So the House has put forth their proposal on Medicaid. I know the Senate's working through their proposal, but this would put states in a difficult position, and they'd have to make some tough choices. Higher education historically has been on the front lines of some of those cuts. There's also on SNAP. So this is what they used to call food stamps, the SNAP program. States will have to take on, at least in the House bill, at least 5% of the cost of SNAP and up to 25% based on the air payment rates in the states. So that could, lead to extraordinary burdens, I think, on states. They say $100 billion over 10 years. There's as well as they're taking on administrative costs. It used to be 50-50 between the states and the feds. Now the states would take on 75%. So again, more costs being shifted to the states. The Senate is just unveiling their proposal on SNAP. It's going to be a little bit more scaled back down to 15%. But again, states taking on additional costs that could siphon money for higher education in the future. So if we go to the next slide. So this is just, this is from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. So this, they go through and estimate the state's air payment rates. And I just did a screenshot of Oregon so you can see, what their air payment rate is and then how that would play out if the House bill were to pass. So that is kind of outside of the Education and Workforce Committee, some of the savings that they're looking at in SNAP as well as Medicaid. There's also a provision in Ways and Means Committee about a new endowment tax, but that is for private institutions with very large endowments. So now we'll dig into sort of the guts of the Education and Workforce Committee. So here is what they're looking at as far as the savings go in the Education and Workforce Committee. The lion's share of the savings are going to come from simplifying the loan repayment programs. And so the Biden era SAVE plan, which is a very generous loan repayment program, would be retired. A whole bunch of the other loan repayment programs would be retired, and they would have a standard repayment program as well as an income-based repayment program. So that is where most of the savings would occur. And then you can see some of the other parts that I'll get into, some of the smaller savings. But this is what the House and Senate are looking at right now. So just continuing on to the next slide. The key focus areas I do want to for this conversation: Pell Grants, student loans, loan repayment, institutional accountability, and regulations. So that those two men are the person on top is Tim Walberg. He's the chair. He is from he's on the House side. He's a Republican of Michigan. And the Senate chair is Dr. Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. So if we go next. So this is a screenshot from Inside Higher Ed, I believe this morning. So this is sort of the Venn diagram of where the House and the Senate agree. And this is going to be a GOP-led process. So Democrats are not really be participating in this because it's they only need 61 votes. So this is going to be led by the GOP. But you can see here some of the areas of agreement as well as where the House and Senate currently differ. And so I'll get into some of the individual provisions here. We go to the next slide. Okay, so Pell Grants, where are they in agreement on Pell? One is that both of them will include $10 billion to address the Pell funding shortfall. So the Pell Grant is looking at a large shortfall over the next 10 years. And I know you talked earlier in the conversation about the FAFSA. Last year, there were a lot of problems with the FAFSA. And so the CBO came back and said that we were going to look at a surplus because fewer people were going to be using the FAFSA. That turned out not to be true. And so with the new Pell formulas and more people applying and using that FAFSA, we're looking at a Pell Grant shortfall. So both of them include $10 billion. One is over 1 year, one is spread across 3 years to help address that shortfall. Workforce Pell. So this is allowing Pell Grants to be used for short-term programs. This is between 8 and 15-week programs. And then they do have one of the big concerns about this is that it could lead to waste, fraud, and abuse. They do have some guardrails in there about job placement as well as completion rates and value-added earnings. But it does allow, and this is a controversial provision, non-accredited, non-institutional providers to participate. So that is, but it looks like this bill is going to include Pell Grants for those very short-term programs. If we go to the next slide. So here is one of the divides between the House and Senate. This is something the higher education community fought hard on. The House cuts off Pell for less than half-time students. So if you have less than 7.5 credits, they would move full-time definition up to 15 credits a semester, 30 credits in an academic year. So then it would be at least 7.5 credits. If you were not above that threshold, you would not be eligible for a Pell Grant. So a lot of community college students would no longer be eligible for Pell if the House provision is included in the final bill. The Senate does take this provision out, but this is something where the higher education community was united in pushing back on this. But according to the American Council on Education, about 700,000 students would lose access to Pell Grants. I took a screenshot there below of Oregon. This is an ACE estimate of how many students would be impacted by the Pell provisions in the House bill, as well as the changes to subsidized loans. And the House bill would end subsidized loans for undergraduate students. So that is in the House bill right now. The Senate does not include that particular provision. Okay, if we go to the next slide. I mentioned the subsidized loans changing. Also Grad Plus. Both of these would end the Grad Plus program. And then there are some different details between the House and the Senate about caps on graduate borrowing as well as professional borrowing, and then total caps for student loans. And then both of them put caps on the Parent Plus. And then there, again, differences in numbers between the House and the Senate. We go on to the next slide. And then I mentioned earlier the most of the savings is going to come through consolidating and streamlining into 2 student loan repayment programs. One standard repayment program with fixed payments, and then another one based on income. We go to the next slide. Institutional accountability. So this is also an area that there's been a lot of discussion. Actually, I'm going to start with the House bill. The House bill includes a risk-sharing formula. So the risk sharing would, if an institution gives a loan to a student and a cohort of students, they would be on the hook for a share of the unpaid student loan balance. And it does have a formula, and I can put it into the chat, or folks can read about it. It is quite complicated, and it's unclear whether we have the right data. People who have run the numbers on this have come to very different conclusions, ACE as well as some think tanks about how this would all shake out. But the House does pursue risk sharing as an accountability mechanism for colleges. And then it also includes some performance-based grants for institutions that are doing well with low tuition earnings, as well as graduating students, and they would give them what they call promise grants. The Senate has a much simpler program. Basically, it's called I would call it gainful employment for all. So if you're, and this is based on, as is at the programmatic level, if it's a federal student loan for undergraduate degree programs where the majority of the graduates earn less than the median high school graduate in the same state, if you're a graduate program where the majority of students earn less than a median bachelor's degree recipient in the same state, in the same field, and then if you, to lose eligibility, your program would have to fail to meet the standard for 2 years in a 3-year period. So those are the differences on institutional accountability between the Senate and the House. And then to finish up here on the reconciliation bill, and then just regulatory changes. They do want to end some of the Biden era regulations on closed school discharge, as well as borrower defense to repayment. Borrower defense to repayment is a law that where a student can have their student loans discharged if the institution broke the law. And then the Biden administration did some new regulations on that they want to remove, as well as new regulations on closed school discharge. And then the House does have some provisions removing the 90-10 rule, which applies to for-profit colleges, and mandating that for-profit colleges get at least 10% of their revenue from non-Title IV or veterans benefits, as well as gainful employment. And gainful employment, again, mostly at the for-profit colleges, but also some community colleges. Basically, the general thrust of that is an institution can't leave students with a ton of debt that does not align with their salary. So those are just the big changes in the reconciliation package. If we go to the next slide, FY25. So this is the funding for the past fiscal year, and we're just waiting on the Department of Education to go through this. We had flat funding because we had a continuing resolution for the entire year. So Congress just decided to continue what they were funding in the past. And we're waiting for the Department of Education to release the funding on particular grant programs. And then to finish up here with a few slides. The FY26 budget process is starting. So the Trump administration has put out their budget blueprint that calls for a 15% cut to Department of Education programs. It does include eliminating several programs that are important to the higher education community. The Strengthening Institutions Program, TRIO, Gear Up, SEOG, Teacher Quality Partnerships, C Campus, FIPSI. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is many of them that folks have brought up to me. And the Pell Grant maximum would be reduced by nearly $1,700. Basically, what they're saying there is we're looking at the Pell Grant shortfall. If something doesn't change as far as the funding goes, we have to balance out the Pell Grant account. So if we can't make policy changes, we're just going to have to reduce the overall maximum Pell award. That's unlikely to happen. I haven't seen Congress ever make such a sweeping reduction to the Pell Grant maximum. Usually, if they have to make changes, it's through the eligibility for Pell. But this is something that they included in there and just basically told Congress to act on Pell Grants. Federal work study would be reduced by 80%, as well as cuts to the IES. So Congress right now is going through the Trump budget. If we go to the next slide. Other initiatives that the department has done, reduction in force. So 40% of the team at the Department of Education has been laid off, although we are hearing that they are starting to bring some folks back. Restarting student loan payments. So they want, for the first time since basically COVID, they're collecting on defaulted student loans. And they've asked states for their partnership in helping build awareness for this and letting students know, hey, if you have loans, you have to start repaying them. New guidance on accreditation, particularly as it pertains to DEI. There was an executive order on accreditation, and I know the department has put out a paper the other day, basically saying, if here's how we're going to handle if you want to switch accreditors, and trying to make that process as smooth as possible. Combating anti-Semitism has been a hallmark of this administration. Also, student aid fraud. So there's discussion earlier about the FAFSA, and there's been concern over the past few years about ghost students and students who were applying for financial aid but were not actually going to college. So they're including new measures with ID verification to crack down on student aid fraud. Negotiated rulemaking is going to start pertaining to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And then they're celebrating Title IX month this month. And then just one or two more slides I think I have, and then we're done. New supplemental priorities. So one of their priorities at the department this year for grants, discretionary grants, is returning education to the states. So those that are applying for grants, if you're aligned with states, that's something that you can include in those grant applications. And that aligns with the administration's priorities. So that includes state higher education agencies. And then lastly, the executive orders. So the travel ban, which applies to I think 12 nations, and then there's other nations with a partial travel ban, but that's going to affect students and scholars. Protecting American communities from criminal aliens. So that has actually recently played out as far as in-state tuition for undocumented students. They sued Texas the other day. Texas actually said that they agreed with the administration and decided to change their policy as it relates to in-state tuition for undocumented students. I think if they go to other states, they're going to get a lot more pushback and lawsuits. I did mention accreditation reform, and they're looking at creating 1 million new apprenticeships. So they're focused on the skilled trades. Closing the Department of Education. A lot of talk about this, but ultimately that is a decision that is up to Congress. And then also keeping men out of women's sports. I think that there's one or two more, and then I can take questions. The indirect cost caps. So right now, if you're at NIH, the average indirect costs, so these are administrative costs associated with grants, like 28%. This would ratchet that down to 15%. This was immediately met with a lawsuit from the research universities. So you can see at the bottom here, these research grants from these major federal agencies are really important for research institutions. And so they are pushing back on efforts to cap those indirect costs at 15%. And then lastly, I mentioned the travel ban, new scrutiny of Chinese students that Secretary Rubio, the State Department has discussed, as well as a pause on student visas as they scrutinize the social media of international students. One last one that I did not include in here that is brand new is that there was a lawsuit filed today in Tennessee pertaining to HSI, so Hispanic Serving Institutions. Hispanic Serving Institutions, as you may know, it's about 25, you have to have 25% Hispanic students to be considered a Hispanic Serving Institution, and then you get access to federal grants and you get access to federal aid. That is being challenged because basically they're coming back and saying, hey, if we can't do affirmative action, we can't admit students based on race, and we want to become an HSI, there's a dilemma there for institutions. So this is the same group that sued pursuant to trying to end affirmative action. So that is, again, something to watch out for in the months and years ahead. I do have a daily policy update if anyone wants to subscribe to that. But with that, I'm sorry, I'm getting gobbled up a lot of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, do I see your hand up?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Tom.
Yeah.
I'm really curious if you could just give a little bit more color on how the discussion around artificial intelligence is affecting the views around the role and need and funding for higher ed.
Yeah, I haven't been having as many conversations about that. I know that they're very interested in artificial intelligence, and they have a new executive order on artificial intelligence. But I I haven't been as following that as closely. But I'm happy to circle back with you and the team to provide more information on that.
Commissioner Devlin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Three very quick items. One, can we get a copy of this sent to us, this
Yep.
presentation? And two, there obviously is no good news for higher education in your report. But going back to the Medicaid and SNAP, because
Yep.
those are going to have significant impacts on states. You mentioned the possibilities of increasing match rates, which obviously would. Has there been any discussion of adjusting who would be eligible? For instance, lowering the power. So if you were at one level of poverty, you might be eligible now, but in the future, you will not be eligible.
Yeah, I know that there's been different ideas being floated out there right now, and I know the Senate is talking through it. The House presented their bill, which I know got at the issue of provider taxes and froze the provider taxes, as well as lowered the reimbursement rate, I think, for certain states. I think based on if they provide Medicaid to undocumented individuals. And there's a few other provisions in there as well. It's unclear, again, where this is all going to shake out. But I think one of the reasons that they're focused on Medicaid is that they're just looking for more savings in the package. And the real push-pull right now that we're going to see as this bill goes through, and their goal is to pass it by either July 4th or by the end of July before August recess, is the savings that come in, and the deficit hawks are going to push for more savings and more cuts, while more moderate members of the GOP conference are going to be, I think, pushing back on that. So yeah, there could be in the end different changes to that, but I think on the Senate side at least, the discussion seems to be a little bit more fluid about how those cuts are going to be implemented.
Thank you. Madam Chair, looking at the budget for the Oregon Health Authority, the legislature just had to re-up their provider taxes. If they hadn't re-upped them, the state would have needed about $2 billion more in general fund to balance the budget.
Wow.
So that's a huge impact if you couldn't have provider taxes.
Yeah, I think it freezes provider taxes. So I want to be clear about, I think it freezes provider taxes. But yeah, there's more information on the House bill. I think the Kaiser Family Foundation has actually dug into that. So encourage you to check out those resources.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hammond?
Thank you, Chair Rowe. I wanted to ask a question about the proposal that certain programs would have their eligibility for Pell discontinued based on, sound like, income performance upon graduation. Is that correct?
It would be individual programs, and it would apply to student loans.
Yeah.
And it would be, individual programs. That is in the Senate bill. The House has a different approach to accountability. My thought is that they are going to have some sort of accountability mechanism in there. And it'll be interesting to see if it looks more like the House or the Senate version. Yeah.
So I have a specific question. As you're well aware, most people who graduate from community college graduate with a AA or AS or a general non-programmatically specific degree. I'm questioning how that rule would apply in a community college environment.
Yeah, my feeling is that they're going to look at the SIP codes of different programs, and then use that data to look at the performance of the graduates and to see how they're just going through it right now and seeing to see whether they're higher than the median high school graduate in the same state. So but I can provide more information to and follow up with that.
Yeah, I guess my thought or concern there is that whereas the four-year program, the restriction would apply to a specific programmatic degree, in a community college, it could end up applying to essentially the whole institution. And I don't know if anybody's thought that through yet, but it seems perhaps a little broad.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Okay. Yep. I can provide more information on that.
Thank you. Very nice.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tom. We appreciate the presentation, and I think a lot of us will sign up for your updates. And it'd be nice to get good news from you sometime, because you sure don't have any this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Ben, any last
Yeah, dude, definitely. Tom's daily updates are a must read. I have subscribed for years. They're my primary way of staying on top of higher education news, both national as well as digest of what's happening in other states. So definitely encourage folks to take advantage of that, and we'll send out his presentation so you can get that link.
And the link.
Directly.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go
Thank
back
you.
to work, Tom. Do some good.
Thank you.
Okay, well, after that presentation. Okay, I think next we have the public testimony, is that correct?
Mhm.
And
We received word that Abby Lee will not be able to join, so we'll proceed to Rebecca Robinson.
okay. Here on screen.
Good morning, Chair Rowe, Vice Chairman Hellman, Executive Director Cannon, and members of the Commission. For the record, I'm Rebecca Robinson, and I serve as the Associate Vice President for Economic Development and Industry Relations at Oregon State University. I'm here today, hopefully to share some good news after that presentation. That Oregon State University recently released our Economic Impact Report. This report was compiled after months of research by Parker Strategy Group, which shows that Oregon State makes an extraordinary impact on Oregon's economy through our statewide programs and operations, capital projects, wages, student spending, and visitor spending. This powerful ripple effect supports local and statewide economies to the tune of $3.5 billion annually. That means for every dollar that's invested in the university by the state, OSU returns $13.8 to Oregon's economy. Some of the report's other highlights include that OSU's operations, students, visitors support a combined total of 22,000 jobs throughout the state. And in fiscal year 2024, collectively generated an estimated $243 million in taxes. In the Corvallis area alone, our impact, of course, cannot be overstated, with an economic impact of $2.2 billion. But also in Central Oregon and in Bend, our OSU Cascades campus drives economic development, generating an impact of $89 million and supporting and sustaining over 700 jobs. But of course, one of our biggest contributions to Oregon's economy is our graduates. 134,000 alumni live and work in Oregon. Collectively, they will generate an estimated $258 billion over their careers, reinforcing the value of an OSU degree. Our work and impact is spread throughout the state. We're expanding access through our eCampus programs. 28% of our eCampus students live in Oregon, and 79% of those degree-seeking students are enrolled part-time, showcasing the flexibility and adaptability of an online education. Through our OSU statewide extension, ag experiment stations, and the Forest Research Lab, we provide programming in all 36 counties and annually serve nearly 90,000 young people. We engage over 8,000 volunteers and more than 600 employees. As was discussed in the previous presentation, federal research funding awarded to OSU has a profound impact on our statewide economy. Grants bring new dollars into the state that support cutting-edge research and drive innovation. in fiscal year 2024, we were awarded $370 million in federal research grants. Since fiscal year 20, those research expenditures at OSU have risen every year, totaling more than $1.6 billion over that 5-year period. We have a long history of bringing those research discoveries to market, creating new commercial products, and launching companies. And since 2013, we've launched more than 100 companies, most of which continue to have their employees as well as their research and development capacity in Oregon. So thank you for the opportunity to share how OSU serves as a critical engine of our state's economy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That is good news. Any questions? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. What others? Oh, Commissioner Edwards. I'll put my glasses on.
I'm back again.
Good.
I got two completely unrelated questions. One is more coherent than the other. I'm interested in whether there's any fundamental differences that you can point to about the difference between OSU Cascades and the main campus in Corvallis.
Do you mean fundamental differences in our impact, or?
Yeah.
So the impacts, I would say, are similar in that we have educational programs, we have research, we have outreach. The geographic differences, right, allow us to engage more hands-on day to day with those regions. Because of our size, we're obviously orders of magnitude greater impact in the Corvallis area and region than we are in Cascades, but that presence, particularly as we look at Cascades, many of those programs are directly aligned with the regional needs of that region, of that area. And so you have, in some cases, distinct programs that are tailored to the needs of that region. And similarly, of course, in the Corvallis region, but also to a greater impact. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of exactly what I was getting at, was what that sort of systemic differences. And are there things that you're looking at transposing between the two, or different styles of learning or different styles of engagement, especially as sort of the whole community networks shift around with some of these big societal shifts? What kind of conversations are you guys having about extending impact in different ways?
So one thing I would say on our OSU Cascades campus, there's a really intense focus and intentionality around experiential learning and applied programs. And so that, as you all are aware, there's significant support from the Central Oregon community in having OSU Cascades and that 4-year degree program in Central Oregon. And so those programs and our academic program plans are fully aligned with input from our regional stakeholders. So you have some unique programs like outdoor products, our Doctorate of Physical Therapy program, our arts, media, and technology programs that are based on the specific demands or workforce needs in that region. In Corvallis, we have some really unique capabilities and infrastructure that exists. So you think about the Huang Collaborative Innovation Complex that's coming online, and the power of the supercomputer, and with these evolutions with AI and robotics and a number of these emerging technology areas, that the physical campus and the infrastructure that we have, I think, will also play not only an impact in that region, but statewide because of that concentration.
Awesome, because that gets to my second question. There's an enormous technical proficiency because of an AI, because of the obvious. Huge, no question. But a significant part of the way that AI is going to affect all of our economy and society, and any impact, is actually about the humans. And I do think there's a bit of a gap here, that it's sort of a little bit out of balance, very technical, but and working hard to figure out how to make the human impact. But how are those conversations progressing at OSU about how to increase the sort of human impact and the human experience and a real positive direction out of this AI investment, not just, well, we're going to automate away all everyone's jobs. How are you thinking about growing the scientific community, growing the data structures, growing the involvement of others who aren't technical to balance that huge technical investment?
Yeah, I appreciate the question and would love to have a follow-on conversation because it's probably more than we have time to talk about today.
I'm
but
sure Sandy's probably been driven crazy by my take.
Yeah, as we're looking at AI, the intersection with AI, as you noted, can have significant impacts across every discipline that we research, that we teach, and so across the campus, actually, we're having conversations about those intersections and how do you not leave behind certain disciplines and also leverage the tool and technology that is AI in order to continue to make our degrees, our research relevant to, say, 21st century workforce. That could include engagement of learners that have already graduated, right? Lifelong learning and other opportunities to ensure that we, because of our existing capabilities, we have significant capabilities and expertise in AI and can infuse that across everything that we do to ensure that that the broader workforce collectively at all levels has the ability to use the tools to augment their work, not necessarily replace their work.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
And thank you, Rebecca, for presenting.
Of course.
Okay, next is Kevin Neely.
Thanks, Chair Rowe, Member of the Commission, for Director Kevin Neely. I have a little presentation. It's in your materials. I know you're pressed on time. I'm just going to give you the highlights. I apologize to the folks online that they have to look at my bald spot. So it's just part of the fun here. I really wanted to build on some of the stuff that Tom talked about and just give you a sense of kind of what's going on at the federal level, at a more granular level related to Oregon's public universities. First, I want to just talk a little bit about Pell. There is actually the best and maybe only piece of really good news in what Tom presented is that Congress on both sides of the building has fully funded Pell or indicated that they're going to fully fund Pell. Had that not happened, you could have seen an 11% reduction in the coming academic year and almost a 30% reduction in the following academic year. So it would have been absolutely devastating. And it would have been devastating because in Oregon, we get about $120 million just at the public universities. So I'm not talking about the community colleges. There's another big chunk there. That come to students in the form of Pell Grants. So there's $120 million. We get $465 million in loan support. So it's collectively almost $600 million of the revenue that's coming into Oregon's public universities includes a federal component. That affects 23,000 students in the 24 academic year as it relates to Pell. 32,400 students as it relates to federal loans. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50% of the students attending Oregon's public universities have some intersectionality with federal funding. So just to give you a sense of the scope. As it relates to our total tuition and fee revenue, the universities bring in somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion in tuition and fee revenue. It's up there. So awesome. So you can see here that after you take out remissions, the right side is federal, the left side is the total revenue. No, 46.9% of the net tuition revenue of our institutions comes out of DC. So we are deeply reliant on this funding source. So all of those things that Tom talked about earlier in the meeting, we are taking a very careful note of. There's lots of good news in there between the House and the Senate, but it's still a pretty bleak picture. Then at the very end, Tom alluded a little bit to F&A rates. I want to just point out that nearly a little over $600 million in research money comes to Oregon's public universities. And of that, only 95 million is kind of direct money. 512 comes in the form of grants for which we get F&A reimbursements. So those reimbursements range from 40 to over 50%. They offset the cost. I encourage you to go listen to Jamie's discussion of this at the F&A meeting yesterday. Jamie did a great job of describing it, so I'm not going to try to describe it for you today. But I am here to tell you that the loss of those funds, particularly at OSU and U of O, puts tremendous pressure on the resource base of those institutions. Okay? They use that F&A to help offset a range of other academic costs. And so already we've seen NSF, NIH, Department of Education all establish a 15% cap. That is a third of what most universities are getting. And so it's a real challenge. And this pie chart just gives you a sense of kind of how it impacts the individual universities. So you can see OSU, U of O, and PSU are the lion's share, but everybody is going to be affected by that. So again, I'm going to limit my comments. I've handed off to Guthrie a copy of that presentation, but there's the bottom line number. It is a significant amount of funding that's coming to the institutions. So we're all paying very careful attention. And the last thing I'd note, we're not just paying attention, we're engaging. So many of the universities at an individual level are speaking with their congressional delegation to talk about the specific impacts on an institutional basis, and at a global, across the state basis. Oregon Council of Presidents is heavily engaged in working with the delegation to keep them informed of the profound impacts that changes in federal policy could have across the state. Again, I didn't speak to some of the other things that Tom spoke to, SNAP, Medicaid. Not only are they going to put significant pressure on state budgets, so many of our students, particularly our most vulnerable students, rely on those programs to frankly get through their days. So we're all keeping a pretty close eye. I think one of the things we also need to try to figure out collectively, working with Ben and your colleagues here at the HECC, is how do we make sure to elevate this conversation as there's more clarity with our legislative partners, so that they understand that one of the key pipelines for the economic vitality of the state, the economic vitality that you just heard so much about at Oregon State, continues to thrive. So those are some of the things that we'll be working on. This will be my last meeting as the director of OCOP to talk to you. The real director is coming in July. She'll be here at your August meeting, I'm sure, to talk to you about the work we're doing on that front. I'll stop there. Questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms?
Kevin, if in August, if we could have, by then we'll know what's happened to this bill, and the numbers in every category are just huge. What we haven't been able to hear yet, and understandably why not, but is the universities saying what they're going to be able to do. I know it's limited, I know the effects are still going to be huge, but if we could ask for that presentation in August, just sort of not just what they're losing, but what accommodations they've been able to make in what areas and how.
Yeah, that's great, Chair Rowe. We'll go ahead and do that. I think already a lot of the universities have put a lot of that thought into place about kind of how they're going to manage these things. I will say by then, we will certainly have clarity on the state budget, and so that's a big factor here. I think we'd like to come back and talk to you about the state budget implications that Ben talked about earlier, and hopefully we'll have more clarity about what's going on at the federal level. I think, I'm not sure I would handicap the likelihood of them getting something across the finish line in August. I think there's some folks that think it will be another continuing resolution. There are other folks that think we'll get a reconciliation act across the finish line. At this point, it's really anybody's guess, but we are right now working on kind of trying to sort out kind of what the House implications are, what the Senate implications are, particularly as it relates to grad students. As you heard from Tom, that's a big area of impact, but yeah, we'll run that information down to you.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to have you in this role, even temporarily, so Thank you for doing it. And-
Thanks for all the work you all do.
Thanks, Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I just want to make
Yeah.
a comment.
Please do.
I'm an employee of the University of Oregon, and so, our president has made it clear that by the end of the summer, there will be significant layoffs across all employee categories. Already, faculty are being laid off. There's fewer graduate employees being hired in departments, and there's fewer student workers being hired in departments. So, the federal work study cuts proposed was concerning for people to be able to avoid taking as many loans out if they don't have access to loans to work their way through college. All of that is being kind of curtailed in many ways. So structurally, it's going to be really hard on our communities. It's not just as we all know very well, it's not just a university issue. It affects all of our communities and businesses that rely on them.
Yeah. When 70% of your revenue comes from students, any changes to student behavior, right,
Yeah.
is going to have an impact, a deep impact on the campuses, and that doesn't include the CSL issue, which fundamentally just says the state money isn't going to meet the same level of service. So lots of challenges ahead. Again, the last thing I'd say before I truly part is I build on what OSU said in some of our legislative presentations that we did this year. We looked at the economic impact of all of the institutions. I think University of Oregon is about to also release an updated economic impact on the state. It's going to be also a really big number, and collectively, annually, it's getting up towards $11 billion a year annually that universities are giving back. And so for the $1 billion we get, again, we're returning somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 1 on that investment. So the narrative that universities and that the degrees that we are providing don't provide ROI individually or to a community, simply a false narrative. And you all know that. I'm preaching to the choir. So the biggest thing we need to all be focused on is how we can advance that message more broadly.
Thank you very much again. And this is the environment into which we have to look also at the structural questions and the relationships. Okay, before we are running a little behind, let's go back on the agenda and do the program.
You're right. You're doing it all in order.
Yeah.
We're a little behind, but we are in order.
We'll catch up.
Yeah.
We'll catch up.
Yeah.
Okay. On the first 6 you see for community colleges, those are just notifications of statement of needs, so we don't have to take any action. Those are for you to be aware of because they will be moving through the system. The next 7, starting with 6.7, the consent item for Lane, the next 7 are community college consent items. As you know, if you want to discuss any of these or have questions, we need to pull it out of the consent agenda. If not, can I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda for community college programs?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
And a second. Thank you very much. All in favors?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that consent agenda passes. And the last group is the university program approvals. There are 3 of those at Eastern, OIT, and Portland State. Any need for discussion or pulling out any of those? Okay, motion please.
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you very much. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposition? Thank you very much. Those pass. And now we have Kyle Thomas and the legislative report.
Yeah, good morning, Chair Rowe, members of the Commission, Kyle Thomas, Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs. I will be off camera.
You're off camera? Is that
I am off camera today. Yes,
How are you
sorry.
holding up? That's what we really want to know.
I am under the weather, have been under the weather for a few days, so that is why I'm off camera, but I am nonetheless working. But I'm literally lying down on the job right now. So I'll give you a little bit of an update on the budget as well as HECC bills that are moving through the process. And I'll start with the budget and give a little bit more detail than either Ben or Sarah did. So Senate Bill 5525, that is our main budget bill. That passed out of the Ways and Means Committee last Friday. That can receive a vote as soon as tomorrow on the Senate floor. A primer for those who might not be familiar. So what becomes the HECC budget is not one bill, but it's a collection of bills that appropriate or allocate resources to the agency. The vast majority of the budget is Senate Bill 5525, but capital construction legislation, individual bills that might have specific line item appropriations, and the end of session colloquially named Christmas tree bill all affect the final budget for the agency. The budget bill represents what's basically a current service level budget with a small reduction to HECC services and supplies budget line, which is expected to be absorbable without major impact. A highlight of the CSL budget, if there are any highlights, is that dedicated funding for institutional benefits navigators will continue for the next biennium. The departures that are in this budget bill from the current service level are small. First, committee legislators approved a reauthorization of 77 million of currently available and already encumbered federal funding to continue Future Ready Oregon. And second, they approved providing expenditure limitation for $5 million in capital construction bonds for the next phase of HECC's modernization project. And finally, they voted to reappropriate the 2024 Financial Sustainability Initiative funding with a note that HECC can retain about 200,000 of that to sustain a position related to building a direct admissions program in partnership with community colleges, public and private universities. Sarah talked about the GRB additions and other governor's priorities that are not in the budget, so I won't review those. It does, of course, remain possible that some add-ons will come in the flurry of end-of-session activity, but there isn't really much optimism this time around that there will be any significant additions owing to the constrained resources and significant uncertainty related to current and future federal action and its direct effects on the state budget, as well as its indirect effects through shifting economic factors. With the adoption of the formal budget comes the opportunity for the legislature to express their intent around agency work. And when the legislature desires to do this formally, but without the passage of a law, they can utilize a process called a budget note. And that's the note that Chair Rowe alluded to earlier today. These are notes that are voted on by the Ways and Means Committee, and while technically they're not legal mandates, they function as them all the same, just as we would be hard-pressed to implement a bill in a way that's directly contrary to the way that the legislative record establishes how legislators view the bill and what it does, even when the statutory language would otherwise permit us to do so. We would really have a similar challenge doing that and ignoring a budget note. This note reflects a theme of concern we've heard before, centering on the questions of our public universities operating sustainably, efficiently, and in line with factors related to their operations that are changing all around them. This note requires a comprehensive report from HECC to the legislature during the 2026 legislative session that assesses the spending and cost efficiency of public universities, the factors that affect institutional spending and efficiency, and reporting on other issues related to preserving the integrity of the educational experience for students while maintaining long-term financial stability at these institutions. And the process and methods for how we're going to do this work are still in the process of being determined. Just as interesting as the budget and the budget note is what legislators said when the budget was being discussed. First, the discussion at the Ways and Means Committee was, perhaps rather unfortunately for the cause of higher ed and workforce development, dominated by the topic of outdoor school. While this is a K-12 program, the funding is in HECC's budget because the program is managed by OSU. The discussion was related to the fact that Measure 99 requires 4% of projected lottery funds to be set aside for the program, but the adopted budget proposes to set aside less than that. That's legal, as budget law can override statute law, and it very frequently does. But it nonetheless took most of the attention away from the central components of our budget and our activities. As for the discussion that was related to HECC, it represented some calcified themes or ideas we've been hearing for some time. So some legislators in the Ways and Means Committee would want you to know that they continue to have some concerns about the progress we're making on transfer initiatives and whether we have enough teeth to get this work done. That they aren't entirely certain the governance structure, including the existence of HECC in its current form, is the best possible way to achieve progress in higher education. They wonder if the system and institutions are doing enough to help transform the economy and prepare a workforce to meet current workforce demands. They want to understand if the funding formula that we use to allocate funding to community colleges and public universities are the right formula. And they have concerns about the adequacy of funding of higher education. So these are comments from individual legislators in a public setting, but they aren't new, and they are largely reflective of similar comments we hear on and off as we do our work in the building. And while I think we would hope that the funding adequacy concerns were a better vocalized and more consistent concern, the comments I've relayed provide us with some insight in how to work with some legislators and the work that we need to do and the information and assurances that we need to be able to provide legislators in order to build more faith in the system and become better positioned to have higher education funding adequacy become a more prominent concern in the building. I'll turn to our sponsored legislation now. So we started the session with 6 bills, one of which was previously pulled from the process. That was House Bill 3029. Our workforce fix-it bill, that was pulled from the process, you may remember, because it contained language that we perhaps need to do some more work on regarding priority populations and how priority populations and language around diversity is used in allocating awards to entities or individuals. I've considered a second one of those bills now to be pulled from the process, and that's House Bill 3030. This is the bill that would have transferred the Oregon Administrator Scholars Program from TSPC to HECC. The Administrator Scholars Program is the program that provides aspiring educator administrators with a scholarship to get the education required to become licensed in that area. TSPC has been operating this program. The legislature has determined that due to the overextension of resources available to EAC through the funding lines that they have, that they are not going to facilitate a transfer of additional resources to HECC at this time, and so that obviates the need to have the legislation establishing the program enshrined into law. Of the 4 remaining bills, one has been signed into law by the governor. That's House Bill 3027, providing injunctive relief authority to the private career school unit to go seek an injunction in court when their orders are not followed by institutions that are out of compliance with Oregon law and rule. And 3 other bills are set to receive their final votes this morning in the Senate as soon as in the next hour. So that's House Bill 3025. Dealing with our financial aid programs, that's establishing short-term credentialing, short-term credential financial aid eligibility, removing the shared responsibility model from statute. That's House Bill 3023. It's an omnibus bill that notably contains the changes related to the teacher scholarship program we're seeking in order to have that diversity-oriented program be compliant with federal law as that law is understood through Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and other related action, as well as House Bill 3028, which removes the Office of Degree Authorization fees from statute and allows us to set them in rule. And that, I think, Madam Chair, Commission members, is all I have today. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Cal. That's a good and quick run through. Questions?
Madam Chair, just a general question. In terms of the structure of higher education, do you think there's an issue within both the subcommittee and the full committee, the fact that you only have about 2 members of the subcommittee that were here when the reforms to higher education were passed, and it looks like only about 5 of the full committee?
Chair Devlin, thank you for the question. I think this relates to a comment that Ben made earlier, which is it is hard to find, and this is partially because of how committee assignments, I think, work in the legislature, and the fact that I think that oftentimes the assignment to the higher education committee or the responsibility to deal with issues pertaining to higher ed is often viewed as a more junior or less coveted assignment, that we do have less continuity than is ideal when you are trying to build a strong advocacy position in the legislature. So the roster of legislators that are consistently abreast of and interested in higher education issues is consistently changing. I don't know how much questions about structure really do bleed into the funding levels we see from the Ways and Means Committee. I think in recent past, the legislature has done quite an excellent job in recovering from the 07-09 era losses that the higher education sector achieved. And I think the fact that that recovery has been so steep, although Oregon remains a lower funder of higher education relative to other states, reflects that the legislature is comfortable in funding higher education, even as they're asking some entirely reasonable questions about structure and efficiency and governance. What this may be preventing, if anything at all, is the sort of next transformational level of investment. And not that the state has had the resources to do that, but they are questions I think we can expect will come up when the conversation about that transformational investment eventually, hopefully, does mature.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Mr. Edwards?
Thanks, Kyle. The conversations that we've just had before about some of the potential disruption to funding of higher ed, as well as, which, you know, is kind of the Cascadia earthquake of higher ed, as well as discussions about the significant increase, the return on investment to the communities. I'm kind of curious about what feels like a bit of a disconnect. You know, you said it yourself that there's a sort of a status thing. There's not the same level of kind of engagement with higher ed as the economic engine. Can you give me a little bit more idea about what's required from us to really sort of step that into I'm confused about that. Can you help me sort of understand why that feels like a disconnect?
Yeah, Commissioner Edwards, I think you are not alone in your confusion about that. I think there are some at the agency who probably share that. There's definitely some in the higher ed institutions that share that. I think I have a personal view that I'll sort of take a risk of sharing, and maybe Ben can chime in. And that is, I think, in the past, and this has been my experience in working in two different states with two different state legislatures, is that legislatures do have a hard time wrapping their heads around sort of the types of economic ROI indicators that institutions themselves put out. A lot of those studies that are sort of self-funded by institutions, I've watched legislators read them, digest them, and have a hard time really believing that those numbers are true. And I'm not personally attempting to try and call into question the veracity of those figures. I think what legislators care most often about, and what I think we do a less good job talking about in the building, is the return on an investment, specifically as it relates to workforce opportunity. That's what I find legislators perk up the most when you talk about. They care a little bit less about whether $1 invested equals 9 times a return, and very much more about whether a dollar invested is going to produce X number of jobs or qualified job seekers in their community. It's a little bit more of a direct way of talking about it that I think that they appreciate, and that we, as a higher ed community, I think need to get better at talking about.
Thank you. It struck me then that what Tom was talking about earlier with what the Senate's thinking about with, I think it was like something, I can't remember what the phrase was, but this benchmark of degrees against like an average of wages from high school is, if that is a way of thinking about this that's going to be quite a different way of communicating the value of higher education on the margin. But you probably weren't there for that part of the discussion.
Yeah, let me, I think that's right, Commissioner Edwards, and let me just add on to what Kyle said. I agree with his reflection. I'll also say, I think for legislators over the decade and a half now that I've been either a legislator or working closely with legislators, fundamentally these budget prioritization decisions tend to come down to trading off or weighing investments in people who are in poverty, people who have food insecurity, people with disabilities, really the human services portfolio of high need Oregonians who are attempting to access direct service from the state, support from the state, versus investments in our colleges and universities that, if you're not working closely with them, often seem to be doing okay, right? These are institutions, they have robust programs and buildings, and yeah, we know they would like more money, we could do good things with more money, but if you are fundamentally having to make difficult decisions that only the legislature has to make. I mean, we as a commission don't experience this because we advocate for higher education, but don't have to weigh it against other priorities. That's a very hard, I mean, it's understandable, I think, that a legislature would have leaned as heavily as it has towards direct service and support towards very high need, fragile Oregonians, kids in foster care. You can go on down the list, and those have been, if you look, as I have been over the last several weeks, looking at a decade and a half of state budget trends, that is what jumps off the page. This is a state that, through its legislative and gubernatorial leadership over the last decade and a half, plus federal policy changes, including the ACA, and its requirements upon states, or the opportunity for states to grow their investment for federal match in healthcare. This is a state that has put a huge priority on social services and has grown that enormously. And that has clearly come at the expense of other program areas within state government. So without editorializing, I think that is very much what's been occurring over the last decade.
And where do you put prisons with, where do you put prisons?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, our public safety budgets have been relatively flat or even declining. So if you were to, this is a state that has attempted very hard, leadership has attempted to constrain the growth of our public safety budgets. I think that's probably a good news story. That has actually helped to accommodate some of the growth of spending in other areas, including education.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Devlin.
I'm doing this only from memory, and I'd have to go back and check the numbers again. But when I looked at the 4 bienniums, including the biennium when I left the legislature, which was 17-19, until 23-25, the increases in general fund expenditures for human services have been about, this is just general fund, about 109%. And the increases in higher ed had been about 33%. So you can see that stark difference. Also, in the current budgets that are being produced, once you make some of these commitments, they're very hard to pull back and to get legislators to vote to change them. Is that in the Department of Human Services, not OHA, because OHA is its own case, but in the Department of Human Services, the general fund increase for this coming biennium is about $1.3 billion. So roughly 300 million, and the increase is roughly 300 million more than the entire university support fund. I just think that there has to be some way to create some more balance. it may be a unique view of mine, but I think part of the legislature's problems are not simply budget because of shortfalls in revenue. They're a lack of a more broad view of all of the areas that the state is responsible for and how those interests have to be balanced. That you can't just simply concentrate on one area at the expense of others. And I think the legislature is going to have to come to that reckoning in the next couple of bienniums because they've made too many commitments in some areas to be able to fund them in the future.
No disagreement there. Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Edwards, thank you for that last question. That was particularly helpful. We are going to go on break now for 10 minutes only, so come back and we'll get started at 11.
I can share this, it's still finalizing.
Great. Okay. We're ready. Ben, do you want to mention this as you're going to, is that going to go to everyone or not?
I don't know, we're still,
Okay.
yeah, still.
Never mind. That's to come. Okay, Veronica Newell, there you are. Thank you, Veronica. It's our strategic activity on public university evaluations, University of Oregon, OSU, and PSU.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Heyman, members of the Commission. For the record, I'm Veronica Dusha, and I'm the Director for Academic Policy and Authorization. The evaluations before you today come to you once every 2 years. There are 7 institutions, but we break them up into 2 groups. We do the comprehensives, and then we pivot and we do the regionals. So legislation requires that each institution be evaluated in a specific manner, and the purpose is to assess the contributions of each institution in terms of state objectives for higher education, as well as the Commission's strategic plan. To do these, we rely on a combination of reports that already exist, for example, the accreditation reports, self-assessments that they might do on criteria that were jointly developed when these reports were initially required by legislation, and a combination of federal and state data. The evaluation signals areas of interest to the HECC, support the objectives of the state, and these include student success as measured by degree completion, access and affordability as measured by equity across socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and regional areas, and when we say regional, we mean urban and rural areas, academic quality and research, financial sustainability, and continued collaboration across the institutions as they attempt to meet the state's objectives in higher ed. And we also have sections in these reports that comment and report on the boards and how they have operated since their formation. You have 3 of these reports today, and I would note that yesterday there was some conversation about the financial health sections. These have more recently been expanded. We didn't always do them with that level of depth, and my colleague in the Office of Public Finance and Capital do these every year for all the institutions. So the reports look very similar, although tailored for each institution, and it can be quite meaty, as especially in the times that we are, an attempt to capture what the institutions, how they're faring in terms of their financial health. I would add that we have an iterative process working with the institutions. We do send them the data that we have. There are sections that they fill in, and you will see those as they report on their collaborations and sometimes their research. We do check and attempt to have that iterative process for checking for accuracy, that what we have on our end in terms of the data matches what they have. But we do ask that these are up for a vote today for approval, but should we discover any errors of fact, we ask that staff allow the opportunity to correct these before they are submitted post-approval to the legislature, and we are expected to do this by June 25, the end of this month, 2025. Thank you, and I will take any questions that you might have. I do have my colleague Jim Pinkett with me to address any that might come up in relation to the financial health of the institutions.
Questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Smith first, please.
Thank you. I am looking forward, and I should have marked it when I was reading the University of Oregon report, which I have a little bit more familiarity with the institution, so could spot things that didn't seem quite right. One of the charts or tables said that an interesting number of classified employees, I think our classified employees is 1,800. I think it was written as classified employees, so that may be, 1,800 is our number. It may have included other employee groups possibly in that. Maybe it also included graduate employees and student workers. But I don't believe it included officers of administration, because that was another chart. So maybe just take a look at that number. I'll look and see what page that is on.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will double check those numbers.
Commissioner Devlin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about enrollment at PSU. And I know that they're still classified as having issues in that area. Are we getting any indication that it's becoming more stable? At one time, they were vying with PCC as being the largest post-secondary institution in the state. And now, obviously, their enrollment is way down since COVID. And has there been any indication that they're getting more stable?
Commissioner Devlin, I can only report on what we do see in the numbers, and Portland State University has been experiencing a continuous decline in their enrollment. We do know that they have indicated interest, or they continue to explore opportunities to increase enrollment numbers. So for example, the direct admissions initiative that the HECC, along with a statewide work group on direct admissions, have been working with institutions to promote pilots as they get ready to have a more statewide launch, and Portland State University is one of these institutions. So I'm not in a position to talk about whether they're getting more stable. I can say they're engaging in more efforts to increase enrollment.
I think those efforts are pretty strong from what I've understood when we visited and in a conversation with President Cook since then. But I don't think they are yielding results as of yet. So there is no good news there on enrollment.
Madam Chair, this is just a singular area, so I'll probably make the inquiry directly to PSU to find out what's happened here. They had made a great effort in terms of attracting American Indian and Alaska Native students, and they'd kept up those numbers for three years, and now they have dropped literally by 2/3 the number of enrolled American Indian and Alaska Native students, from 307 in 23 to 108 in 24. There has to be an explanation for that. I mean.
Thank you, Commissioner Devlin. We did reach out to Portland State because we did notice that decline. What we were able to confirm is that the numbers are accurate, but it wasn't clear. They weren't clear on why that declined.
Can we ask further?
Yes, for sure.
Can I, just on that, there's a large, this is not a direct answer to what is going on with PSU's numbers for Native American, Alaska Native students. I will say there's some work going on at the state level led by the Oregon Department of Education to better understand broadly within our education systems who our American Indian, Native American, Alaska Native students are and how they identify. Because of course, many students who identify as Native American also identify with other categories of race, ethnicity, and I think there's every reason to think, or that we know, that the numbers we see on these Native American, Alaska Native breakouts, which uses the census categories, are significant undercounts, probably by many orders of magnitude of the actual number of Oregonians who identify as Native American, Alaska Native. But they are checking, if they're enrolling in a college or university, they're checking the 2 or more races box. They may be checking the Latino Hispanic box because they have roots also in indigenous or Hispanic cultures of North or Central or South America. So this is really sort of a preview or a taste perhaps of the conversation that we would have about data and race ethnicity with a particular focus on Native American, Alaska Native students. Again, partly through the leadership of ODE and some really good work they're doing to much better and more comprehensively identify students within the K-12 system, not using this very limited census definition.
I would like to add to that. I think that is a very important point because this is a process of self-identification, I believe, derived from the enrollment process, whereas, the student is self-identifying and has a list of choices to check certain boxes, which is, typically not a the best way to measure a person or an identity, but that's what we have and that's what we do. And I feel like in this instance, it's the best way to do it. But that also, I think that a better look at the Oregon Tribal Student Grant and the enrollment data over there would be a really good way to tell if we're looking specifically at Native American and Alaska Native students, you know, what the numbers are. But if we're looking at the institution specifically, I can say just from my experience from being the higher education coordinator for my tribe in the past and being in the education group in the Oregon 9 tribes, my role that University of Oregon does a lot of work around attracting Native American and Alaska Native students, and they have multiple programs that they have started before the Oregon Tribal Student Grant was on board, and they have a lot of marketing around those efforts as well. So it wouldn't be surprising to see their numbers be vastly different, and though we have a very large and active rural Native community in Portland, I am not sure that that population is of, you know, post-secondary age or, you know, of that direction. So because our students probably more come from our families who live in Oregon and have historically been in Oregon. So there are a lot of different effects on that. And so, but I could, and I know PSU from our, as we all know, we took the tour over there and we see their indigenous food labs, but like, I feel like it's good to remember too that you have like you have the rate of change in education and in government, and then you have the rate of change in education and in government in tribal communities, and it is relatively very slow. And so for PSU's efforts, I feel like it's going to take a while to really get even on par with what U of O is doing. But I feel like they're going in the right direction with their specialties around food, whereas U of O specializes in education with Native American. I could talk about this forever. Those are some of my.
Thank you. No, thank you. Appreciate it. You need that. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Veronica.
Chair Rowe, this is a.
Oh, that's right. This is the first of. I'm sorry. Please go ahead. Next.
So we do recommend to approve the evaluations as presented to you.
Okay. And all three, or do you want them separately?
All three, unless there are reasons why a commissioner may choose not to approve one of those.
Okay, if it's okay with commissioners, can we have a motion to approve the university evaluations for PSU, Oregon State, and University of Oregon?
So moved.
Second.
Second, and that is subject to any corrections that they see before they go out. If we can amend that motion. I'm sorry, I should have done that first. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was about to move on without approval. Okay, next report is Oregon Conservation Corps Biennial. Doug Deming, is Doug here? Deming? There he
I
is.
am here online. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Chair Rowe and Vice Chair Hammond and members of the commission. My name is Doug Denning, and I'm a program and policy advisor at the Office of Workforce Investments here at the HECC. And I also serve as the director of the Oregon Youth Works Advisory Board. So I appreciate the option to be here virtually with you this morning. Again, the reason to be here is to bring before you the required Oregon Conservation Corps biennial report for your approval. And just as a quick refresh, and for those of you that are a little bit newer to the commission, the Oregon Conservation Corps is a youth-focused wildfire risk reduction and workforce development program that's housed within the Office of Workforce Investments. And it was initially funded in 2021 with a one-time investment of $10 million. In 2023, it again was invested, a $10 million investment was made, one-time funding again. And I point out the one-time funding just to note that, you know, the budget for this program has not been a part of HECC's CSL that would just typically roll over. For the 25-27 upcoming biennium, the funding for this program was not included in the governor's budget, and it is not a part of HECC's budget that just went through and was approved by Ways and Means. So while this report is technically a biennial report, I want to point out that the data in this report covers from January 2022 through December of 2024, and that gives a full picture of where we are to date with the program since inception. And we won't have the numbers from January of this year through the end of this month until this fall, but we wanted to get this report turned in prior to June 30. So we will have a final report that'll have that additional data, and we'll make sure to get it to you in the fall. So this report is statutorily required to be given to the legislature, to the Wildfire Programs Advisory Council, and to the governor's Wildfire Programs Director. So that's the brief overview of it. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, anything you stump me on. Hillary Blackstone is also online. She's the grant administrator for the program and is the subject matter expert when it comes to the on-the-ground programming and the data. So between the two of us, we should be able to answer questions. Yeah, and if there are no questions, I appreciate your time, appreciate the consideration for the approval of this report. And if there are questions, I guess we're ready for you.
Commissioners, you've read the report. What questions do you have? Yes, Commissioner Smith.
So I'm just clarifying that this might be the last report for this program. This program will be concluding unless money becomes available in the final budget. Is that?
So if you want to take that, there may be one more report, but go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I think that's really up in the air. Even though the program isn't currently slated to be funded, the program still exists in statute. So we'll have to see if local programs are able to find additional funding to keep the programs up and running. They have the infrastructure in place. It's just the operating funds that they'll be missing out on. And you know, there could be fundraising done at the HECC level, working with different, say like the Ford family or Oregon Community Foundation. I mean, I don't know quite where we take this, but the programs technically still will exist. We just will not have the funds. And the other thing too is, even though it's not in the HECC's budget right now, there are a couple of bills that are rather controversial, and there's not agreement on how to raise funds for wildfire in general. And so those discussions are still taking place, but they only have, you know, a couple of weeks to get through that. And there is a chance if the wildfire funding packages do pass, there's a chance that we could receive up to $10 million. But again, that's separate from the current budget.
Thank you, because it seems like there's need, there's interest, and there's results through this program. So whether the results continue out of this program or are taken on by a different parallel kind of program.
Have you had any discussions about that with parallel programs or with nonprofits? I'm thinking of Nature Conservancy or other organizations that have done work, certainly in controlled burns and in forest management. Is there any reaching out that would be helpful or that you have done that we should know about?
I will say that during the first funding cycle, there was also an additional $1 million of general fund that could be released if we raised matching funds for that were non-state funds. And so we have worked with philanthropy. We worked with the Oregon Community Foundation. And as far as like the other partners and agencies in this realm, yes, we work with all of those agencies and programs, well, not all of them, but all the state agencies very closely. The original funding for this came from Senate Bill 762 in 2021, and 11 state agencies received funding through that bill, and we were one of the 11. So the group of the 11 agencies, we still meet. quarterly and talk about programming. Hillary has also set up a community of practice between the folks, the local grantees, as well as a separate call that has the agencies. So we're talking with emergency management, with ODF, with the fire marshal's office, and all talking about each other's grants and where they overlap, where they don't, and how they can leverage each other. So the talks are there. We would just need to expand if we don't find funding. We'll expand who we're partnering with.
Can I just further comment that I just think this kind of, I've met a lot of adults who have had experience in their youth working in fire management, and it was really formative for them as maybe not college going young people, and I see a significant portion of female identifying young people engaging in this program, and I just think it to raise awareness, but also straighten some kids out who don't know where they're going in life, but this gives them some structure and some skills that are really needed in our state. So thank you for the work that you've put forward to supporting this program.
Yeah, and if I could just comment really quickly on that, there is a built-in pathway into the program, which is really cool. And a lot of the young people that are going through the program come out ready to be fire certified. I mean, all they have to do at that point is their PAC test, but they've taken all the additional training and completed it, and they've been introduced to folks in that sector. And we're seeing, and we don't have an exact number, but we are seeing folks that graduate from this program move directly into fire service.
Wow. Okay, good luck. We hope you can find something.
If I may, I'm sure because Doug and Hillary don't hear from me all that often. This is a terrific report, and it does, I say that in part because it does, to Commissioner Smith's point, it does such a great job of illustrating the multiple simultaneous benefits that this program confers. You've got youth getting paid work experience. They're learning skills and getting certification that can be applied towards career, and they're mitigating fire risk. It's just this remarkable kind of confluence of good that is being produced out of this program. It is, as you've heard, a potential casualty of the one-time funding that this state was able to put to use in prior biennia that's not slated to continue. So we have a lot of concern about that. We have raised this issue repeatedly with legislators. There's great testimony in the Ways and Means Committee from program participants and program committee or program leaders on this program. Specifically, there's a hope until the session ends. There's hope, but we probably are looking at Plan B. But I do definitely want to credit Hillary and Doug for their leadership on this. It's been amazing to see it at work, and I have seen it work because I've been on job sites, and it is really
Wonderful. Thank you. We will,
Can
yes.
I make a really quick comment? Don't tell them I sent you if you go, but may I recommend pursuing partnerships with Oregon tribes?
Yes. So, somebody else was going to go. Sorry.
Sorry, that was just me, Hillary, here on the line as the grant administrator. But Doug, if you would rather take it, that's okay.
Either way, I will say that we are working with the tribes. Hillary right now has a very specific tribal project that's being partially funded with the Bureau of Land Management. And so that's a really cool agreement that's been put together. And then with the Oregon Youth Corps, which is separate from the Oregon Conservation Corps, we're really looking at how we partner with tribes and all come to the table together as tribes and try to remove that grantee-grantor relationship and just be true partners at the table. And so we are going into intergovernmental agreements with the different tribal nations and really changing what that conversation looks like and asking how we can support rather than telling them how to basically write a grant application to us. And Hillary, if you've got more to share on that, please feel free.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to share was that we have already completed the grant application process in the case that we do get funding so that people won't have an interruption of funds and we'll be able to get going right away. So if we do secure funding, the oncoming folks that would receive funds as far as tribes go are Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians, and Burns Pipe.
Well, perhaps reach out to Commissioner Andrews and see if she has any other ideas.
Feel free to reach out.
Yes,
Yeah,
see if
because
there.
Thank you.
in tribes, sometimes we have pass-through money, you know, that we can just.
Thank you.
Pursue that. Whether or not it helps, it's a good thing to do. So thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for this report. It is an action item, commissioners. We need to accept this. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, thank you. Now we are ready for the report from the F&A Subcommittee.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Rowe. You have a written report in your packet, it's item 10.1. Just want you to be aware of that, so I'm not going to read through that. There were three I think major components to our meeting. One was the presentation of the financial sustainability report on the public universities. Thank you, Jim, for your work on that. There was then a follow-up panel discussion from two of the schools, Southern Oregon University and the University of Oregon, I think giving us a more detailed sort of feet on the ground understanding of what was represented in that report. And then we had an action item on the Community College Strategic Fund, and we'll get to that. First of all, just that report, it's not in your packet, but if you are interested in seeing it, it is in the materials for the F&A meeting yesterday. It's 3.0, 3.0A, and 3.0B, and I think it's worth, if you haven't, I think it's worth your review. There's some, I think, very, very detailed and I think weighty information in that report. I would just say that both that and then the follow-up panel discussion really reflects and reinforces this conversation that I think Chair Rowe, we started in our last meeting regarding just the significant challenges that I think we faced in higher education, perhaps predominantly financial, but in a variety of other ways as well. And sort of the sense of, refrain from the word urgency, but I think that's what it is. It is, we need to, and I think we all share that sense of we need to take a more active and deeper look at what we need to be doing in higher education in order to be sustainable in the future and serve the population and the state that we are called to serve. So I would really encourage you to take a look at that report. I'm going to note, at the end of the presentation, there were three key takeaways that were represented to us. One is just a recognition that while there aren't any like immediate financial crises at any of the 7 institutions, they're all under significant financial stress. And if you're looking forward in terms of capacity to sustain their current circumstance, there's no good news. These are challenging times, and I think it's really important for us as a commission and the universities and together to think more deeply about what do we need to be doing differently in the future to provide a sustainable model for higher education in the state. And I'm not going to pretend I have the answers to that question, but I certainly think we need to be delving into that and working to define some of them. Jim identified those three takeaways. I think so one is just that financial pressures on sustainability. The second one, again, this was, I think, presented very deeply by Tom from SHIO. The issues at the federal level are unstable and leaves an awful lot of ambiguity in terms of how we should be responding to federal policy, because it changes. It's certainly different from the past, and so that was another takeaway from that report. So it's not just state level issues. There's federal, you heard, impact on changes in Pell or changes in research funding, grant funding, have significant impacts on our institutions. Different at different institutions, but overarching, I think, Tom, I think the number was about $600 million in direct impact for our universities, significant amount. Third item that the report indicated was that just the recognition that, and I'm going to build on this one a little bit, recognition that just as challenges of public education require a different kind or a deeper conversation with the communities of need, and sort of how do we create a stable environment that would respond to those needs, not just to sort of survive, but to, as phrase, but to thrive in an environment where education can continue to make the kinds of return on investment that we heard in another report. I want to add to that, and I did in the meeting yesterday as well. Certainly in our visits to the various colleges and university and the discussions we've had here, we're growing recognition that public people that we serve directly and more broadly the communities are very different than the people we served 20 years ago. And the radical changes are a shift rural, more diverse, they are more economically challenged, they are more part-time, and they're way more inclined to do education online. Whether they necessarily like that, but we visited schools where over half of their FTE is online now. And we're talking about students who actually live in residence halls who are still taking the program online. We weren't designed to do that. So one of the things that I think that this report really emphasized, and I want us to grab onto, is that might have implications for the way, not just how much we fund, but how we fund our institutions, universities. Community colleges have made, and I know we're looking specifically at the universities here, but this is true of all. Community colleges have made, I think, a significant argument that it costs more to serve part-time students than full-time students. And we don't really reflect that in the ways in which we think about the way we fund education in this state. More of our students are trying to, in the old world, we used to do this whole thing sequentially. We did high school, college, then a job. We now see students doing high school, job, family, college, all mixed, humbled together. That's a different population to serve. You saw in, I think, Tom's report that some of the possible changes in Pell could result in limited access to Pell Grants and by those kinds of students. And so those are all really significantly challenging issues for our universities and colleges. And I encourage you to take a look at that report. I think that it gives some solid foundational detail on this thing that we've been discussing, which is just as this is a time to take serious action, and grateful that we are one mind on that issue and that we will continue to pursue that. The last item there was a action item on the Community College Strategic Fund. Just want to give you a quick strategic fund. I believe we established in 2005, maybe off the year, pretty close. 2005, which was a collaborative effort with community colleges to take a portion of their community college support fund, and instead of having it distributed to the 17 institutions, to hold it apart to address more systemic collaborative issues. Things had to do with develop of student success strategies, a variety of areas that had to do with how do we do curriculum and things like that. That has, I think, proven to be a very successful way of addressing sort of broader issues within the community colleges. For the most recent past, we have approved a set aside strategic fund of 0.75% of the community college support fund. The recommendation that came to us yesterday to the FNA was a 1% set aside for the community college support fund, and we as the FNA committee are forwarding to you with the recommendation that you approve that. And Commissioner Middleton, yes.
If I have questions about that, should I wait for Donna Willing, or would you like to answer this?
Oh, Donna.
Hi. Good morning, commissioners. For the record, Donna Llewellyn, Director of CCWD. What can I help with?
So it's my understanding that the Community College Support Fund is going forward at CSL current service level, and yet you're asking for an increase for the strategic fund. And the increase results, I mean, it's only 0.25%, but we've been at that 0.75% since 2017, I think. Or at least that's what
yes.
I was able to find. So it's an increase of more than 2 million, and I'm just wondering kind of where that's coming from, since the CCSF fund is moving forward at current service level, which we know really will result in cuts since there's been so much growth at community colleges. So.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Middleton, for that question. We are actually awaiting the completion of a community college shared services study that may identify additional areas for leveraging state investments and actually reducing overall college investments. For instance, economies of scale and purchasing state licensing or whatnot. There is also one point that I would like to make aware to everyone, that if these funds are not expended for strategic purposes, they actually do go back out through the Community College Support Fund distribution formula at the end of the biennium. So these are being set aside for strategic purposes to leverage, as Commissioner Hayman said, economies of scale, and to support all 17 community colleges and strategic initiatives. If the funds are not expended, they will go back out to the community colleges. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does.
Am I correct, Donna, that you said yesterday this is by agreement of the presidents of the community colleges?
Yes, this recommendation is coming forward. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
This is their number.
Yeah, I would, just a slight notice on it. It is a commission decision. You are, if you choose to accept the staff recommendation here, you are also accepting the president's recommendation, which was for the 1%. That is what's reflected in the staff recommendation for your consideration and final decision making.
Yes.
Thank you. Does that address?
It does answer my question, and I guess because we're moving forward at current service level, I would be against, and my colleagues would be upset with me if I didn't bring that objection to the table. I would be against increasing the strategic fund based on what Donna Lloyd just said, that it would go back to the colleges, which is where we need the funds. I'd be against this move, raising it.
Okay. And are there any other questions that could help you? Or do you feel like you know what you need to know?
I think I know what I need to know.
That's fine. That's fine. Any other questions?
I did, but I was thinking of answering.
Commissioner Yamasaki.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there you are.
Well, I
hear you today.
This has to do with the funding and achievement meeting yesterday. And I really appreciated having the two institutions give us some outlook on what's going on. One of the things that I'm curious about, and I know we're not going to talk about this today, but after listening to them yesterday, I am really curious about the impact of the community colleges awarding bachelor's degrees and what that means for the universities in terms of, as they were talking about who their students are in their enrollment. So I just throw that out there that, again, I'm not sure I understand the impact of the community colleges awarding bachelor degrees.
Is that something? I'm just wondering how far, let's try to address it briefly. That's a longer question, I think.
Right.
But Donna, I don't want to cut you off from trying to respond. Just know we might put a pin in it too and talk about it more later.
Yes.
That would be my recommendation, Chair Rowe and Commissioner. I would entertain maybe a list of questions, and I can work with my colleague Jim Pinkard and perhaps Amy Cox in research and data to provide a more thorough answer. It's really early to tell because the very first cohorts in those degree programs are just now starting.
Okay, that's what we'll do. We'll come back to it. You will hear more. Yes.
Thank you. Kira, I was going to follow up a little bit about this funding. So it sounds like maybe the community college presidents thought that through these institutional enterprise purchases they could achieve a savings of $2 million for all the colleges combined. That's their concept. As opposed to going up to 0.8. I mean, do they have ideas in mind of where they already want to spend that money? So is it already kind of like pre-committed in their minds about like where these, this award, these strategic funds would be designated?
Chair Rowe and members of the commission, some areas have been identified for investment, which include continuation of investments in continued improvement in student supports and shared services, supports for a program that helps draw down additional federal dollars known as the STEP program, which is a partnership with the Department of Human Services through the food stamp or supplemental nutrition aid program. So these are strategic investments meant to help reduce overall costs for the colleges as a whole. Those have, so roughly about 0.65, please don't quote me on that, has been identified, and the colleges recognize that they're still waiting for the outcome of this shared services report that may identify significant other areas where a shared investment could result in overall institutional savings. So what they are trying to do is create a balance fund to be able to strategically invest if additional areas are identified.
Can I just add to that, if it helps give the commission confidence, these strategic fund spending decisions are ultimately subject to Donna, the Director of Community Colleges and Workforce Development's decision. So again, like the setting of the fund cap, the fund maximum at 1.0%, we at the HECC will make the final decisions about how that funding is spent. Typically, historically, we show a lot of deference to the presidents and their recommendations in that. But it means that while those are not decisions that we, under our current sort of delegations of authority, bring back to the commission for your review and oversight, you obviously, through your governance role, oversight of me, et cetera, have some opportunity. And I just, perhaps it will increase the confidence in the commission in support for this 1.0%, knowing that ultimately how that money is spent is subject to oversight from commission staff.
And I'd like to add, not specific to this one, but in general, we have talked as we visited all the schools, they are pushing for this. And even at the university level, we are going to be pushing for this. This is one of the big pieces where we think we can make a difference in having more shared services. So if you don't like this one, there's more coming.
So just as a point of clarification, so, I mean, I'm just talking about this, I don't need a hypothesis, I guess I'll ask. So they've already identified that 0.6% of that funding kind of for projects that they'd like to see. They're awaiting to see what the shared services cost might come out to be pending a report. And that might be, they only have about, it's funded at 0.75, they only have 10% then to fund that, but it might be 20% cost to fund that. So then it might be 0.85%, then they return 15% back to the colleges, depending on the outcome of the report.
That is correct.
So it's up to 1%.
Yeah,
Yes,
any remaining balance, anything that isn't spent for a strategic activity that we make the final decision on, goes back out to the colleges through the funding formula at the end of the biennium. That's in keeping with the commitment that the legislature has made that all of those CCSF dollars ultimately have to go to colleges.
Yes.
We may spend, if this motion passes, we may spend up to 1% of them on strategic investments, but it's up to. And any remaining balance gets redistributed to the colleges based on.
I didn't understand that before, so I am in favor of this. Thank you.
Very good discussion and good questions. So thank you all, and thank you, Donna. If there are no other questions, this is an action item.
Move to approve?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Donna, Ben, Mary. No, that's a good group effort. Thank you. Okay, that is the last action item before the election. Am I correct, Guthrie? Have I forgotten anything?
That's it.
Okay, folks, we're going to move to the election. And we will have open nominations. I will start them off though, probably not surprisingly. I would like to nominate Dr. Greg Heyman as the next chair of the commission. Given the challenges we know about and the ones we don't yet, excuse me, there really is no one I know of who is better suited, better through experience, through character, through everything he does and knows, and his vision and his commitment to lead the HECC and you as commissioners for the next term than Greg is. I've been very fortunate to have him as a partner. And this is the first time in Ben's memory, this is the first time the chair and vice chair, and it wouldn't always work, but it worked with us, really functioned as partners. I mean, this hasn't been the chair and the vice chair. This has been the partners. And in fact, when Terry Cross and Ben, one of several times were trying to talk me into standing for chair, first thing I did was grab Greg during the meeting, and we went out in the parking lot and walked the parking lot while I said, okay, I'll do this if you'll promise to be my partner and be the vice chair. And fortunately, he said yes, and we have been partners in everything. It's really, it's certainly, we've learned a lot from each other. I've learned a lot from you. As you know, he's got a very rich and deep education background at the local level. He's been a teacher at the national level, leading Community College Association and being honored by them several times. President for a decade of Lynn Mitten Community College. And in fact, when I was fairly new on the commission, he was the president, and it was the first community college I visited in a formal way. That was when we were moving meetings around. And he really, even from that first time, opened my eyes on the potential and the importance of community college, and especially in terms of the ties to the community. And you could see right then, just in that one afternoon visit, we could see how much of a difference he was making on that campus. You could almost see the before and then the changes that he was leading. He also led Clatsop Community College for a period, you might not know that. And when we visited all of the schools around the state, the number of times when people in the administrations, both at Summit University, but certainly at community colleges, they'd say, oh, I know Greg real well. I used to work with him at Clatsop, or I used to work with him here. So he is respected and known as he should be all around the state. Everything we have accomplished in the last 18 months, and a lot of it really was to get us ready to undertake the kind of transformational change that we now know we absolutely need. Everything we have done, he has been a major part of and a leader, and he was one of 3 members of the commission who helped do all of the work on behalf of all of us for the strategic plan we just adopted, or several months ago now we adopted, when we were trying to figure out what really is the knot that keeps enough progress being made in the council, the transfer council. Greg stepped up and said, I'll do it, and is our representative there. And then, of course, on all of the visits. So it has been a great pleasure working with him, and I hope that all of you will have that pleasure in having him as chair. So I nominate Greg Heyman. I could have a second, and then I will see if there are any other nominations.
Second.
Thank you. Any other nominations for chair of the commission? Any other comments on Greg's nomination? I think I'm clear to take a vote. All in favor of Dr. Greg Heyman as the next chair of the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Mr. Chair.
Well.
And now you need a vice chair.
Yeah, and I didn't know that we were doing a resume review, thank you. Before I thank you. It's an incredible honor, and I take it as a deep responsibility to work with all of you and forward the work of the commission. I think especially the work that Chair Rowe and I have, I think, focused on in the past year. And I tend to be a change agent, but right now I'm going to try to continue the effort that she and I have started, and I think that's what we need right now. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity to work with you, and recognizing the critical importance of the kind of partnership that a chair or a vice chair need to have. I'm going to nominate Commissioner Emily Simnett to be our next vice chair, and there are a variety of reasons for that. One, when she came onto the commission, we immediately started to talk about, okay, core issues about, so what really matters when it comes to higher education, and I've valued her thought and input on that issue. She also was one of us who worked on the strategic plan and have been invested in that work. She also teaches one of my favorite and most difficult subjects, and she does it at a great university, and so that represents a whole lot of, I think, counterbalance to my community college history and year-long university history. And for a variety of reasons, I'm excited to be able to work with Commissioner Simnett in this next year. So I nominate Commissioner Simnett to be the Vice Chair of the Higher Education Board Commission.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor, Commissioner Simnett as Vice Chair of the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Thank you for your willingness to do this.
Well, I really look forward to continuing the work that you started, Chair Rowe, and working closely with Chair Heyman. I think we have definitely got our work cut out for us, as we just can have heard in multiple moments today. But I think it's really important work, and I believe in us as a body that we can get the work done and move forward into the future.
We can, we absolutely can.
Fantastic.
Any other business to come before the commissioners today? Guthrie, anything else? Anybody, anything else? Ben?
I'll just note with Emily's election, as the resident commission historian, that this will be the first occasion where we've had, I guess, an officer of the commission come from one of our designated faculty, staff, or student slots. So I think that reflects a continued kind of evolution of the commission's sort of structure. These spots were maybe voting members maybe 4 years ago, and now we have one of our commission leaders. And yeah, just appreciate that we continue to evolve, and excited to be working more closely with commissioners and then, of course, Chair Heyman.
And that's, I'd just like to add, that has been possible because all of you who have come on the commission since the university and college representatives became voting members, all of you who have come on have truly represented the interests of the state and understood that that is your responsibility, that's your top responsibility over representing your institution. So I think it's a credit to all of you who've come on in this new role, and that you really have been wonderful representatives for the full state. So thank you. Thank you, Emily. Okay, no other business to come before the commission. We're adjourned.